how much have you heard a discussion of pleasure
Mhm.
in the general conversation? It's really all about the next thing to be scared about, the next bad thing that's going to be happening. We don't really have a template for pleasure.
Well, here we are again, about to talk about being, playing, loving. This is Katie Hendricks over here, and this is Sophie. Very good to be with you again. So today, we wanted to explore this idea of the unexpected, because I don't know for you, Katie, but life is a little bit coming from all sides. It's not necessarily bad stuff, but there's a lot coming from all directions. So
That is totally my experience, and it just so happens that dealing with the unexpected is kind of like has been the hardest thing for me in my life, because when the unexpected happens, my trained response to that is, uh-oh, it's my fault.
oh,
Uh-oh, I've done something and things are gonna get messed up. Like if I'm doing a recording and suddenly the technology doesn't work and I'm going, I don't, but instead of being able to deal with it, I get all, well, I get scared. And because I get scared, I can't think. And then I feel like it's my fault. So learning how to deal with the unexpected has been really, I'd say, probably the most valuable thing I've learned in my life, because almost nothing goes the way it's planned.
it doesn't. It just doesn't. It's kind of like, it's almost like we should expect it to be unexpected by now. We should know, right?
Well, that expectation, though, whenever I expect, I get kind of solid, like, this is the way life should go.
Mhm.
I was just remembering being a long time ago. I was on an airplane with Gay. We're going to Mazatlan, and we had I don't even know if we had one airplane stop, but when we got to Mazatlan, we got there, but our luggage didn't get there, and our brand new boogie boards didn't get there. And I remember standing in the baggage claim going, this can't, where is my luggage? What do you know? I got all like offended. You're like, I expected my luggage to be here.
Yeah.
And then Gay came over finally. He said to me, he said, that's not going to make your luggage get here any faster. So, but it was, this whole,
Almost
for me,
righteous? Is it a little bit righteous?
well, what I was going to say, it's a little bit of entitlement. Like,
Yeah.
I deserve to have my luggage come, when and so just getting into harmony that really of how little I can actually control. I mean, that's what came through to me, is that that whole area of all that's going on in the world that I really am just doing my best to respond to. And then there are those few things that I can go, oh, I can actually influence that. And so, like in the realm of technology, I've learned by just being, loving myself, and playing. I've learned how to deal with technology so that when something goes wrong, I don't go, anymore. I'm able to go, okay, now maybe it's this, maybe it's that. So it's another form of playing rather than being overwhelmed by the circumstances.
How do we do it? Because you speak like you can switch from one to the other, like we are in charge of ourselves, but sometimes it's almost like there's a physiological tightness that's happening that sometimes feels like it's taken over.
Well, I call that fear.
No?
So when our bodies get in fear, we literally get into a protective. We close down.
Mm-hmm.
And we're turning all of our, in my experience with me, because I freeze, like, oh my God. And then I kind of faint, like, oh, this can't be happening. And then I sort of get fighty, like, my entitled, like, well, just, this should not
make it work.
happen. But when I simply use my body to kind of, wiggle, open up my breathing, then my brain becomes available again. Instead of being on, I can actually go, oh, okay, and I can make a choice that'll make a difference.
So when something comes, I mean, technology, I would say, is almost like what used to be I don't know, if we were farmers and there's a big storm and we really can't go farm today. It feels like every moment of our day now is a technology, something, a new app, a new something that we know nothing about.
Yes.
Is it become kind of is it the storm of the 21st century?
Well, I do think it is. Uh, I experience just a whole bunch of stuff coming at me.
Mm.
And those things all want my attention. It's like little Pac-Man. They want my, and so for me, a lot of it is choosing what I'm actually going to give my attention to.
How do you do that? Is it literally you see the little options almost and you go, all right, I'm going to go this way? Like, is it that?
Well, part of the options are whether I participate in all of the technology that's available.
Yeah.
So there are certain, like I don't do Twitter anymore. I just poof,
Mm-hmm.
I just removed it, and so that's a whole thing that I don't deal with. And then I also give myself a little parameters, like I'm going to go and scroll for a half an hour.
Ah.
And then I'm going to go, and usually I go and I move, or I engage, or I pet my cats, or I talk to Gay, or I go and play in the kitchen. So I'm creating something. So I think for me, the antidote is that I'm creating and I'm engaging with something rather than just going.
Being almost the victim of it.
Yeah, I actually just had which might be a TMI a reveal, but when I was nursing my son, who was a 10.5 pound baby, so I had so much milk that he was going, he just could not absorb all of the milk. And so part of the learning for me was how to just regulate flow. So, and for my body to, to not dump everything. And so I think that we still have that same issue of how can I regulate the stuff that's coming at me and also how I respond to it. So for me, I always go to my body first, because I'm either in flow in my body or I'm stuck in some way.
It's interesting because when you watch children, they move. Like this idea that they're stuck on a chair from the minute they're 3 years old, 4 years old, and you make them sit there still is a bit of a, why are we doing that to them, huh?
That was bringing up an image, kind of a profound change in my life, because as you can see, anybody who's looking at this can see that I'm always moving. Mm-hmm. So when I got into school, was really the first time I encountered you have to sit. Mm-hmm. And when you're standing, you have to stand with another kid, and you have to hold their hand, and you have to move with them. And so I was supposed to sit and learn. And I was so miserable. I was so unhappy. And I was a C student. I just didn't want to be there. And my fourth grade teacher, Mrs. Morgan, noticed this and said, you can go ahead and sit in the back of the class and move as much as you want to.
Oh, Mrs. Morgan, thank you.
Mrs. Morgan, God bless Mrs. Morgan, because I went overnight from being a C student to being an A student because I could move. There are a whole bunch of us. There's, people say it's somewhere between a fourth and a third of us who are kinesthetic learners, which means if we don't move, we can't learn. And I just am so grateful that I had somebody, an adult, who recognized that, and because it made all the difference for me. And then also when I met Gay, I wiggle my toes all the time. And I'd have people say, but stop that. And Gay loves it that I wiggle my toes. Oh. And so that was a big plus. So when we got together, I said, this is the guy I want to be with.
I want to be with a man who likes that I wiggle my toes.
Yes.
I remember being a translator. One of my careers was to translate these pretty sophisticated seminars, maybe the kind of work you do as a group, where you talk deep, emotional. And it was in English and I was translating into French. And I remember that when I didn't know, like I would miss in French, you have to say the words the other way. Like,
yes.
it starts, right? So I need to know if you say, for example, it's a blue, scratchy winter sweater, I need to hear sweater so I can start my sentence.
Yes.
Right.
And then the adjectives and yeah.
Exactly. And so sometimes I would have to wait for a little while to get to the word so I can actually start to give you the context. So sometimes I'd be like, what did she say? And all I would have to do is move my body slightly until I could actually put my hand on her shoulder or just touch her physically, like her back, and all of a sudden I'd be like, oh, I know what she said. Like almost like it gave me my intelligence back or my memory back? Or is it possible that it was that, like even that kind of, I mean, I wasn't just moving, I was connecting probably as well.
Yes, but you were connecting from your body.
Yeah.
So that's another aspect of the proprioceptive, where I am, where you are. I mean, it's called proprioceptive, but what it means is that you can feel what's going on through your body. You don't think through your head, you think through your body. And for me, that's been the biggest change that has opened up the world for me, is thinking through my whole body. But that whole sense of what grounds us, what gives us a sense of I can be here. For some people, it's sound. Like, oh, if I hear a sound, like the sound of one of my friends, she sounds like Glenda the Good Witch. And when I hear her voice, I just feel like, everything is going to be okay, and I can breathe again. So for all of us, I think for so many years we've thought that it's only our head that where we figure things out, and now that we are knowing more and more that we think with our whole body, it's actually making everything easier.
It's interesting. When I was 350 pounds, as you know, that was part of my journey, was to become in my body, because partly I was so disconnected from my body that it didn't matter. Like I was a vehicle, right? My body was just a vehicle for my head. And so it didn't really matter. But when I started integrating this whole body experiencing life, then I could feel the weight and I could feel my bones were not I remember seeing a photo of the bones of my what do you call that bone that's between my foot and my ankles, the bone of
Your ankles,
the little guy. And I remember seeing an x-ray and thinking, this is a very small bone. Like my entire 350 pounds is on that little bone. And I
right, and then the bones of your feet too. Yeah.
And my knees, I mean, just the whole thing. It's not like when you get so much bigger, your bone structure gets that much bigger. So it was so heavy. But until I was aware of my body, it didn't really matter. It was like an old car, just whatever.
It's so interesting you should say that, because Thomas Edison said the same thing, that, the only use of your body as a vehicle to carry your head from place to place. So there are a whole lot of people who really come at the world that way. And I just think it's so profound that, because sometimes I think, how are they not affected by this? How are they not touched by this event or this loss or this feeling? And I think that so many people experienced what you did when you were at 350 pounds, is that they're not actually at home in their whole body. And to me, when I see that, it just makes me so sad, because you don't get to actually experience being alive. The great aspect of being is that you get to go, wow, and oh, and what's that? And, being curious about what is going on in life as a direct experience, not filtered through something that somebody told you and analyzing it, but the actual, be the difference between looking at an ice cream cone like, oh, gee, that's interesting, I wonder what flavor that is, and actually having ice cream and experiencing the coldness and the sweetness and the different textures. So we have all of this sensory apparatus, and most people don't use them.
Do you think it has to do a bit with, like, I remember growing up, there was more of my pain was experienced through my body. Like I felt the tension, and I felt when someone didn't see me, like it wasn't an intellectual, oh, this person does not see me. There was just this physical, like, oh. So do you think it's a little bit like maybe when I don't know, someone gets held at gunpoint at a corner of a street and then they never will go back to that corner, except it's our body. Like, I think for me, there was almost kind of like, I don't want to be where it hurted so much. Like, I just don't
Yeah,
want to go there.
yeah. I see that and I hear that so much from people that, and also if you, how much have you heard a discussion of pleasure
Mhm.
in the general conversation, or enjoying your life, or opening up to the next creative thing that you're doing? It's really all about the next thing to be scared about, the next bad thing that's going to be happening. So we don't really have a template for pleasure. We have great big wide template for pain, and a whole worldview like life is hard and then you die. A lot of or no pain, no gain.
Yeah.
So that we think that pain is built in, like we should.
We should be feeling pain.
That's right. If this is really important, it's going to have some pain involved with it. And I actually have found just the opposite to be the case, is that if I'm not having a good time, I'm not actually learning anything. There's a lot of research about that we could share with people, but the actual experience of, oh, I can learn and have fun. Because I think for me, of course, like going when I first got into school, learning was not fun. And so learning over years that, oh, learning something new could actually be a source of joy. I think most people have missed that.
Well, why do you think we're so far? The whole time we've been having this conversation, I'm having this vision of being away from ourselves. Like we don't, the feelings that we feel, it's almost kind of like I eat instead of feeling. Maybe I watch porn instead of feeling, or maybe I go and gamble instead of feeling. I feel like a lot has been put into, and I don't know, I'm not saying someone did it to us, but I feel like we have really moved away from that, from a child who feels the joy of, you give them an ice cream or they play with the puppy. Or why have we moved away so far, do you think?
Well, I just remembering there's a great quote from James Joyce. Mr. Duffy lived a short distance from his body. And
Not alone.
I remember when I broke my hip a few years ago, I actually for several months experienced myself as being next to me. I actually didn't experience me being inside of my body. I was kind of next to my body because when I broke my hip, I couldn't move and I needed to learn how to move all over again. And during that time I was moving, it was as if there were me observing me
Oh,
rather
thank
than
you.
me being with me. It was a very strange experience. But I think that feeling, this thing that we're talking about today, feeling emotions, sensations, body sensations, the waves of emotions, I think it's one of the biggest issues for us as humans because we're taught too that no, don't bring your feelings to work. That's one thing. Leave your feelings at home. Or if you have feelings, it means that you're weak.
Mm.
It and that strong people don't have feelings; they just get the job done. And we learn all kinds of different messages that don't allow us to like open our hearts and open our being able to be with the very lifeblood, because we're humans because of feelings and emotions, not because of thinking, but because of feelings. And so because those feelings are creating new brain tracks and new brain wiring. And so the more that we feel and sense and open up to letting our bodies fully interact, the more we can use our feelings as actually in place of our thinking. And this is
Mm.
kind of what I call whole body thinking. That if I'm the other day, someone I was talking on a class, a Zoom class, and somebody was talking about something that had happened, and I could actually see it was as if you drop water on or an ink blot and the ink spreads, I could see the feeling spreading through their body. And
Wow.
so what I did is just simply be with them. So I was like, I could see it happening. I could see the feeling emerging. And rather than even saying anything, I just breathed and let that feeling spread out in me. And then it kind of bloomed in them and they cried. But I could see, and then they got what the issue was about.
Mm. It opened up. It opened up the understanding, the
Yeah,
neuro
the
way to
understanding
get
and
there.
actually them being able to problem solve and being able oh, I see what that was connected to. And I could see the life expanding in them. Her face got pinker and the crying, usually we stop feelings and they don't go anywhere. They just go back in and then kind of get stuffy. But once the feeling came through, there was this sense of creativity and more aliveness and more possibility. And just from that little, being with the feeling moving through a body. But how many people know how to do that?
Mm.
Oh, there's a feeling starting. Oh, let me just get curious let me just be with that. Most of us just don't know how to do that. But I think that it's one of the most important things that is either going to help us as a species to solve problems here. And if we don't, I think it's just going to take us out.
It is the way you refer to when we're growing up. I remember literally, I have a physical memory. I was never hot when I was a kid. I was always cold. And so I remember being outside and feeling cold and wanting to go home because it was cold. And I wanted, turned out I had some Hamashi, what is it called?
You had a thyroid.
Hashimoto with my thyroid, exactly. And so it was very hard for my body to warm up. And I remember saying, I need to go, be inside. And now we're having fun, it's outside. And just being convinced that I really shouldn't be cold because it wasn't cold outside. And
Right.
being like,
How can you be cold when it's not cold? Yeah. So
exactly. And then they do it with food, right? Like it's noon, we eat now. I'm not hungry now. Finish your plate. I remember this vividly. This feelings of like, am I the one who's crazy? Like because I'm feeling something, but I'm being told by these grown up things that it's wrong, and to somehow let them convince me.
Well, this is such a profound thing that you're saying that, and I imagine that millions of people have had an experience like that.
Mm-hmm.
And at the core of it for me was the somebody trying to convince me that my experience was not real.
Yeah.
And that I should be having a different experience. And that crazy making, which we call gaslighting, that's gaslighting.
Yeah.
Is like you're not having the experience that you're having is going on all around us now and has been, big time for several years. But reclaiming that experience, I was just remembering when Gay and I were first together, one of my solutions to that problem was to give more attention to what people were saying about what I was experiencing than I did to what I was experiencing. And so if everybody else was okay, I did my best to sort of adapt to that. And I remember Gay saying, because he would say, I'm hot. And then I would say, oh, well, I'm not hot. And he would say, well, I'm sharing my experience.
Yeah.
This is my experience. And your experience is probably different. We don't have to be having the same experience. And that was like, whoa,
Yeah.
that was a pattern interrupt for me. And so being able to, like, for example, I can be sad and he can be happy and we can both be together, and we don't have to, we can make the being together big enough that we can be having separate experiences and be together. And it sounds kind of simple, but actually doing that is something that I haven't seen a lot of humans be able to do. Like a lot of couples, if one of you feels bad, the other can't feel good because your partner feels bad. So you kind of got to tone it down a little bit. So being able to have this really wide range of experiences and going, oh, this is my experience. And I can be with you in this space having a different experience.
I'm even
And it
wondering
expands my
if
choice. And
yes, I was having this moment of, is it true for me? Like sometimes something happens and it makes me sad and happy kind of at the same time. Like there's enough room even in myself that I can have the complexity of two or three things as opposed to I'm sad now. Okay, I'm sad.
no, I'm going to be sad.
You'll be
Everybody
sad.
be sad.
That's
Right.
what I'm doing.
Yeah, I love that. And what you were saying too about being cold when you were outside, that's about circulation.
Mhm.
And what feelings do is circulate energy.
Mm.
So they make energy available, and particularly, if I participate. So what I was hearing you talking about is, I'm noticing, I'm being with it, I'm responding to it, I'm letting myself have this experience. That increases circulation.
And I wouldn't
So
be cold.
and then maybe you wouldn't be cold, or maybe you would go, oh, I'm going to choose to do this because this is my experience.
But when you're a little person and you're, these big people that are, feeding you and providing your roof and safety, it's a bit of a, I can see where people would give up on,
Yeah.
because otherwise, like, what am I going to go on a war against these much bigger people all the time? I think us bringing more consciousness to what we do as adults when we raise our children. So hopefully when they raise their children, like maybe it's
Well,
a pattern.
it's not just children, though, because this is
Oh,
when there is a discrepancy in power. So, someone who's an authority or a perceived authority, or even if you think like somebody is, if I think, oh, that person's way more famous than I am, I should pay attention to what they're saying
yeah.
and give up my experience is different. I don't agree with that, but hey, they're the authority. Or, oh, I just felt horrified about that. So we were watching part of there was a golf game yesterday, and I realized at the end of it, because the person who I wanted to win didn't win. And I realized, and I was telling Gay, all my life, I've not been able to stand it that somebody has to lose. Why do we have to set up that way? That there's a win-lose. So I always feel so sad when, somebody worked really hard and then they lost, and then we never think about them again. We only think about the winner.
Mm.
And that kind of hierarchy is one of the things I want to change in the world. That we honor people's experience. And I actually, back in the day, there were whole books about playing games where nobody had to lose. And
Mm-hmm.
I loved those. It didn't last for very long, though. It was like,
Mm-hmm.
it was a little blip. And then we went back to, it's me or
We're
you
better.
losing.
I have a feeling if someone in the committee for the Olympics was hearing this podcast, they would have something to say. A lot of money is made in beating the other guy.
Yeah, and it's just so much in our culture. I actually think it's based on the same kind of war mentality.
Mhm.
That I think we either have communities of caring and connection,
Mhm.
or of win lose, and then that leads to conflict and us versus them and war. And so I think what we're up to with be and play and love is creating the circulation of, oh, you're experiencing this. Oh, that's so cool. How is that happening for you? And here's what I'm experiencing. And they go, oh, that's so cool. And then together we get to experience more aliveness than we could on our own. And I
Oh,
think that's really something worth doing.
what a beautiful way to bring us to the shore, back to shore here. This idea that first those words were powerful for me, but the more we talk about them and the more I am really letting them sip in my blood of like, this is what I want my life to be. I want to be with you. I want to play with you. I want to love you. It is an honor, as always, to have spent this time with you. And thank you. And look at you.
Here, I'm on a little chair called a swapper
I
that
love
so
that.
enhances my movement. And
I love
And so
that.
when I get excited, instead of my toes wiggling, I wiggle my whole body.
You can do both. You can wiggle and hop at the same time. They would fall in love even more about you if that's possible. Thank you again, Katie, for this moment together, and we'll see you next week.